My name is Bridget S. Bledsoe, and I was 32 years old when I finally realized my parents didn't forget my son's birthday. They just didn't care enough to remember. The first time it happened, I made excuses for them. The second time, I told myself they were busy. By the third, I stopped mentioning it altogether. But the fourth time, something in me broke. My son turned 7 that year. 7, old enough to notice patterns. Old enough to ask questions I couldn't answer without lying. We kept it simple. My husband Marcus grilled burgers in the backyard. I baked a cake with red frosting because that's what he wanted, even though it stained everything it touched. Superhero candles. Balloons taped crookedly to the wall because he insisted on helping. There was one chair at the table I didn't move. I left it there out of habit, out of hope. He noticed. "Is Nana stuck in traffic again?" he asked, staring at the empty seat like it might fill itself if he looked long enough. We lived 15 minutes away. 15? No, baby, I said gently. She's just busy today. He nodded, trying to accept it, but I saw the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes after that. That night, after everyone left and Marcus was cleaning up in the kitchen, I sat alone with my phone. And I scrolled. Years of messages. Birthdays. Holidays. Milestones. Silence on every single one that mattered to us. But the moment something involved them, trips, dinners, events, they showed up. It was like we were background characters in a story they were starring in. And I was tired of playing along. 4 days later, my phone buzzed while I was pouring cereal for my son. A message from my mother. No greeting. No acknowledgement. Just a number. $3,000. $400 for the cabin weekend. Everyone's chipping in. I stared at it. That was it. No. How's my grandson? No. Sorry we missed his birthday again. Just an invoice wrapped in entitlement. Marcus glanced at me. What's wrong? I handed him the phone. He read it, his expression tightening slightly, then handed it back without a word and kept pouring milk. That silence said everything. Something clicked in that moment. Not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly. I had been funding their lives out of habit, out of obligation, out of a belief that if I kept showing up, they eventually would too, but they hadn't, and they weren't going to. I opened my banking app. The shared vacation fund account we set up years ago popped up immediately. For the last 18 months, I had been the only one contributing. They had stopped adding money long ago. They just kept using it, like it was mine to maintain and theirs to spend. I transferred $2, then added a note. Wrong guest list. Then I went further. I locked every shared card connected to my name, froze the vacation fund, opened the transaction list, Airbnb in Lake Tahoe, luxury SUV rental, spa reservations, restaurant deposits. I flagged every single one, not as a mistake, not as confusion, as unauthorized. By the time I left for work, everything was already in motion. No confrontation, no warning, just action. Around noon, the bank called. "Miss Bledsoe, we noticed some flagged charges on your account," the representative said politely. I leaned back in my chair, calm. "Yes," I replied. "They're not fraudulent in the criminal sense, just unauthorized use by relatives on an account they don't legally own." There was a pause. Typing. Then confirmation. "You are the sole contributor for the past 18 months, he said. "We'll proceed with shutting down the cards and reversing the charges, unless additional authorization is provided." "Thank you," I said. And that was it. The messages started that afternoon. At first, confusion. What happened to the account? Then irritation. Why are the cards not working? Then anger. You need to fix this before Friday. I didn't reply. Not once. That night, Marcus handed me a beer, and we sat on the porch while our son ran around the yard with his new Nerf blaster. He didn't ask what I was going to do. He just reached over and squeezed my hand. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this. I thought that would be enough, that the message would land, that they would understand. But I underestimated one thing. People who are used to control don't give it up quietly. 2 days later, they showed up. No call, no warning. I looked out the window and saw my father's Lexus parked halfway on the curb like it still belonged there, like they still belonged here. I opened the door. My mother smiled like this was all a misunderstanding. "Can we talk?" she asked lightly. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. She laughed softly. "You overreacted," she said. "You could have just told us you didn't want to go to the cabin." "I wasn't invited," I replied. Her smile faltered. My father stepped forward. "We called the bank," he said. "They told us the charges were flagged as fraud." His tone shifted. "That's serious, Bridget. If you don't fix it, we may have to take further action." I didn't flinch. "Do what you need to do," I said calmly. "The account is in my name. The cards are mine. The only fraud happening is how you treat me like an ATM while pretending my son doesn't exist." Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. My mother's expression hardened. "Grow up," she snapped. My father muttered something under his breath. "Maybe this is why your brother's always gotten further in life." That one almost landed. Almost. But not quite. Because something inside me had already shifted, and I wasn't stepping back into that role again. They left after 5 minutes. No yelling, no scene. But I knew it wasn't over. Because people like them don't walk away. They escalate. And this time, so would I. I knew it wasn't over the moment they drove away. Not because of anything they said, but because of what they didn't say. No apology. No acknowledgement. No recognition of the empty chair at my son's birthday table. "Just entitlement?" interrupted. And people like my parents didn't handle interruption well. The next morning, I was brushing my teeth when Marcus called from the driveway. "Bridge, you need to come outside." There was something in his voice. Not panic. Not anger. Something colder. I walked out barefoot, toothpaste still lingering on my tongue. And then I saw it. My son's bike. The one he had just gotten for his birthday. Bent. Twisted in half like someone had taken deliberate time to break it. Next to it, our car window had a long, thin crack running across it, like something sharp had been thrown, with just enough force to damage, but not shatter, and on the mailbox, one word, Liar, written in thick black marker. For a second, everything went quiet. Not peaceful quiet. The kind that presses in on your chest. Marcus swore under his breath. I didn't. I just stood there, staring. Because deep down, I knew. They hadn't said it, but I knew. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Every angle, every detail. The bike, the window, the mailbox. Then I called the police. I didn't speculate, didn't accuse. I just told them I had reason to believe who did it and that I wanted it documented. The officer who showed up later that afternoon was calm. Professional. He took notes, looked over the damage, asked a few questions. Before he left, he paused at the door. "Family can be the worst," he said quietly, "especially when money and pride get involved." I nodded. Because that was exactly what this was. Not anger, not even hurt. Pride. Bruised, threatened pride. I filed the report the next day, not because I wanted them arrested, but because I wanted something on record. Something official. Something that said this happened. That it mattered. 3 days later, they were served. Nothing extreme. Just a notice. Vandalism. Minor charges. But real. That's when they snapped. They showed up again. This time, they didn't bother pretending. They walked straight into the kitchen like they still owned the place. My mother's voice was louder than usual. Sharper. "You really went through with it?" she demanded. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. "You're reporting your own parents now?" she continued, Over something this petty? Petty. My son's bike. Our home. My father stepped in, his tone colder. If you're going to treat us like strangers, he said, then maybe that's what we are. I held his gaze. Maybe, I said. He didn't expect that. I could see it. The slight hesitation. The shift. Then my mother said it. The thing that ended everything. If that's the case, she said, her voice cutting through the room, then that boy isn't our grandson. Silence. Heavy. Absolute. I didn't realize my son had come downstairs. Not until I heard the small sound behind me. A breath catching. A step stopping. I turned. He was standing at the bottom of the stairs. Frozen. Eyes wide. Trying to understand words no child should ever have to hear. Mom? He asked quietly. That one word broke something in me. Not loudly. Not violently. Just permanently. Marcus stepped forward immediately. Get out, he said, his voice low but firm. They didn't argue, didn't apologize, didn't take it back. They just left, like it meant nothing, like he meant nothing. I picked my son up without saying a word and carried him upstairs. He didn't cry right away. He just held on to me tightly, too tightly. Do they hate me? He whispered. I swallowed hard. No, I said. But for the first time, I wasn't sure if I believed it. That night, the house felt different, quieter, but not in the same way as before. This wasn't peace. This was absence. And then they disappeared. No calls, no texts, no attempts to fix anything. 6 months. Nothing. At first, it was strange. I kept expecting something. An apology. Another fight. Anything. But nothing came. Slowly, life settled. My son stopped asking about them. Marcus and I found our rhythm again. I focused on work. Started jogging. Repainted the garage. Little things. Normal things. But even in that quiet, there was something else. A realization. We didn't have parents anymore. Not really. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to choose your own family, because the one I was born into had already chosen not to choose me. 6 months of silence changes you. At first, it feels unnatural, like something is missing, like you're waiting for the next disruption, the next demand, the next moment where you have to explain yourself or defend your choices. Then, slowly, it becomes something else. Peace. Not the fragile kind that depends on everything going right. The kind that stays, even when you're still healing. I stopped checking my phone. Stopped expecting their names to pop up. Stopped replaying conversations in my head, wondering what I could have said differently. Because the truth was, there was nothing left to say. Then Evan called. It was late. Later than he usually would. I almost didn't pick up, but something told me I should. They're losing the house. No greeting, no build-up. Just that. I leaned against the kitchen counter, gripping the edge slightly. What do you mean? They took out a loan a couple years ago, he said. Big one. Renovations, credit cards, probably that cruise they went on. They're behind now. Like, really behind. Foreclosures already in motion. I closed my eyes for a second. The Hillcrest house. The one they always used as proof that they were doing better than everyone else. The one they made comments about when we bought our place. People like us shouldn't live in neighborhoods above our grade. I remembered that line. Clearly. They called me, Evan continued. Asked if they could stay with me for a while. And? He let out a short laugh. I told them no. Then they said they'd ask you. Of course they did. The next evening, my phone lit up. Mom. I didn't answer. Then Dad. Then a message. We need to talk. It's important. Please call. I waited, not out of hesitation. Out of control. An hour later, I called back. There was no warmth this time, no fake politeness, just urgency. We've hit a rough patch, my mother said quickly. We may need somewhere to stay for a couple of months. It makes the most sense to come to you. You have the space. I let her talk. About how temporary it would be. About how family supports each other. About how children should step up when their parents need them. She didn't mention the birthday, the bike, the words she said in my kitchen. Not once. When she finally stopped, I spoke. No. Silence. Then, what? I won't help you. She let out a sharp breath, like she thought she misheard me. Are you serious right now? Yes. Her tone shifted instantly. Cold. You're really going to turn your back on us after everything we've done for you? I almost laughed, but I didn't. You didn't even acknowledge your grandson's birthday, I said. You vandalized our home. You told him he wasn't family. That's not what we meant. It's exactly what you meant. Silence again, this time heavier. Final. I remember everything, I said quietly, and I'm not interested in fixing what you broke. She hung up. No goodbye. An hour later, a group message came through. Both of them. You'll regret this. We're your parents. This is temporary. Family sticks together. I stared at it. And for the first time, I understood something clearly. They weren't hurt. They were angry because they had lost control. The next day, Evan texted. They moved in with the Andersons. I knew the Andersons. Small house, 2 bedrooms. The same people my parents once mocked for their cheap lifestyle. Now they were sleeping in that same cramped space. Bags on the floor. No space to pretend anymore. They didn't contact me after that. Not directly. But the silence didn't mean they were done. It just meant they were regrouping. A week later, I got a letter. Typed, formal, signed, notarized. I read it once, then again, then handed it to Marcus. They're serious? He asked. I nodded. They were claiming I owed them money, not legally. There was no contract, no agreement, just implication. They framed it as family obligation, as repayment for things they had done for me over the years. Marcus didn't say anything. He just dropped it into the trash. I pulled it back out, took a picture, sent it to a lawyer, because I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was documenting everything. Then the rumors started. Slow at first. Subtle. People asking if everything was okay, if something had happened between me and my parents. Then it got worse. Someone asked if I was being investigated. I froze. What? They said something about financial issues, she added awkwardly. They? My parents. They were telling people I committed fraud, that I manipulated accounts, that I stole from them. I almost admired the strategy. If they couldn't control me directly, they'd control the narrative. But they made one mistake. They forgot I had proof. The bank records, the account ownership, the transaction history. Everything pointed to the same truth. I wasn't the one abusing anything. They were. I could have ignored it. Let it fade, taken the high road. But then they went too far. They showed up at my job, tried to speak to my manager, claimed I was involved in unauthorized financial activity. That was the moment something in me shifted again. Not emotionally, strategically. I documented everything, filed a report with HR, submitted bank statements, screenshots, account logs. Then I called a lawyer and sent a cease and desist letter. The next morning, I got a call, not from my parents, from Mr. Anderson. I'm sorry, he said immediately. I didn't know they were still doing this. They'll be out by the end of the week. They moved out 3 days later. No one knew where they went. But I knew one thing. This wasn't over, because people like them don't stop when they lose everything. They escalate. And this time, I wasn't waiting for the next move. I didn't go looking for revenge. Not at first. I kept telling myself that distance was enough, that silence was enough, that cutting them out of our lives and protecting what we had built was the real win. But they didn't stop. They kept pushing, kept reaching, kept trying to drag me back into something I had already walked away from. And eventually, something in me shifted. It started with a voicemail. My mother's voice. Rambling, unsteady, sharp in places, like she couldn't decide if she was pleading or accusing. She talked about suing me for emotional damages. Because I sent a cease and desist letter, I almost hung up. Then she said my son's name, said I had poisoned him against his real family. That was it. That was the moment. I walked to the hallway closet and pulled down an old folder, the one I had kept over the years. Not intentionally, just instinctively. Inside were receipts, bank statements, emails, screenshots. Every moment I had ever questioned and then dismissed. Every time something felt wrong, and I told myself I was overreacting. One email stood out. 3 years old. From my father. Back when Marcus and I were trying to buy this house, he had offered to help with the down payment. Then changed his mind. In the email, he wrote, "People like you shouldn't live in neighborhoods above your grade." I remembered reading that the first time, feeling embarrassed, ashamed, like I had asked for too much. Now, it just made everything clear. I scanned everything, digitized it, backed it up. Then I made 2 decisions. Not emotional ones, calculated ones. The first call I made was to a journalist I knew from college. She didn't work major stories, not headlines, but human ones, the kind people actually read. I told her I had something personal, off the record. At first. We met 2 days later. I told her everything. The birthdays, the money, the vandalism, the lies, the threats. She didn't interrupt, didn't question, just listened. By the end, she looked stunned. "I'll need to verify," she said carefully. "But if everything checks out, this is a story." "It's not about exposure," I said. "It's about truth." She nodded. "I understand." The second thing I did was quieter, but just as important. I reached out to their old church, the one they hadn't attended in years, but still used to maintain their image. I sent a message to the board. Respectful, clear. I included documentation, police reports, financial records, a statement explaining why I wanted no further contact. I didn't ask them to do anything. I just made sure they knew, because I was done protecting their reputation. 2 weeks later, the article came out. The headline was subtle. "When family becomes a transaction, a daughter's fight for boundaries." It didn't name them, but it didn't have to. Anyone who knew us knew. It spread fast, not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest, raw in a way people recognized. They tried to deny it, said it was exaggerated, that it didn't tell the full story. But it didn't matter. The facts were there, the records, the patterns, the truth. And slowly, their world started shrinking. Invitations stopped. People stopped calling. My father wasn't asked to speak at local events anymore. My mother's social circle quietly distanced itself. The illusion they had built for years started cracking. They tried one last time to control the narrative. My father posted something online, a long rant about loyalty, about children abandoning their parents. It barely got any response. A couple of comments, from people who didn't know them well. And then, the final piece fell. A letter from the bank. Official, cold, final. The Hillcrest house had been repossessed. They hadn't just left. They had lost everything. That night, I sat on the porch with a drink in my hand. My son was riding his bike up and down the driveway, the same bike they had tried to destroy. Repaired. Stronger. Like everything else in our lives. I didn't celebrate. Didn't feel satisfaction. Didn't feel revenge. I felt still. Because the real victory wasn't the article, or the silence, or the consequences they were facing. It was this. This moment. This life. A home that felt safe. A family that showed up. A child who laughed freely again. For the first time in years, there was no tension in the air. No waiting for the next problem. No emotional debt. Just peace. And this time, it wasn't something I was borrowing. It was something I owned. I thought the article would be the end of it. That once the truth was out, once the illusion cracked, and everything they had built started collapsing under its own weight, they would finally stop, disappear, fade into whatever quiet corner was left for them. For a while, it seemed like they had. No calls, no messages, no rumors, just absence. 6 weeks later, a certified letter showed up. This time, it wasn't from them. It was from a lawyer. I stood in the kitchen holding it, reading the same paragraph twice, just to make sure I wasn't misinterpreting it. They were trying to take legal action. Not for the vandalism. Not for the financial accounts. For the house. They claimed I had knowledge of potential family resources and had refused to assist them during a time of need. I let out a slow breath. It wasn't just desperate, it was delusional. Marcus read it over my shoulder. "They don't have a case," he said immediately. "I know." Still, I handed it to our lawyer the next morning. Just in case. Because with them, just in case had become a rule. That night, Evan called again. "They asked me to testify against you," he said without preamble. I went still. "And?" "I told them they were out of their minds," he replied. "Said if they kept pushing this, they'd lose me too." Something in my chest loosened. Not relief, something quieter. Recognition. "They've already lost everything," he added. He was right. The house, their reputation, their social circle, and now, their sons. The lawsuit never made it to court. Their lawyer dropped it quietly. No announcement, no follow-up, just gone, like everything else they tried to hold on to. The next holiday came and passed. No card, no call, no attempt. But Evan came over, with his kids. Our backyard filled with noise again, laughter, sticky fingers, frosting smeared across cheeks. My son ran around with his cousins like nothing had ever been broken, like nothing had ever been missing. At one point, Evan pulled me aside. "You're the only one I talk to now," he said. I nodded. "Same." And that was enough. Months passed. Then a year. Life didn't just go on. It settled. I stopped waiting for something to go wrong. Stopped bracing for impact. Stopped feeling like peace was temporary. One Sunday morning we went to the farmer's market. It was ordinary, simple. Exactly the kind of day I used to rush through without noticing. That's when I saw them, my parents, standing near a produce stand. They looked different, smaller, older, worn down in a way that no amount of money or status could hide. My mother glanced up. Our eyes met for a split second. Then she looked away, quickly, like she hadn't seen me at all. My father didn't notice. He was staring at a tomato, turning it in his hand like it had personally offended him. They didn't approach, didn't speak, didn't even acknowledge us. And that was the moment it finally settled. Not in anger, not in sadness, but in truth. They weren't my parents anymore. Not in any way that mattered. They were just people I used to know. We went home. My son helped carry the groceries inside, talking nonstop about something that happened at school. Marcus kissed my cheek and started making lunch. The house filled with the kind of noise that felt alive. And standing there in the middle of it, I realized something. This was it. This was the life I had been trying to protect all along. Not the version of family I was born into, but the one I chose, the one I built, the one that showed up. No guilt, no performance, no emotional debt, just peace. And this time, it wasn't something they could take from me. It was something I had finally claimed for myself.